Hi, everyone. Welcome back to CAHS Career Prep, where we talk all about how to get you ready for a career in arts, humanities, and social sciences. I'm Nicole McDavid, and in today's episode, we will be talking all about networking and follow-up from that. And to discuss this topic, we have professional Kristin Scroggin here with us today. Thanks for coming, Kristin.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Kristin has spent the past 8+ years researching and delivering keynote speeches on generational diversity. She is the owner and CEO of genWHY Communications. She has worked with NASA, the Missile Defense Agency, the Army, the Air Force, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Procter & Gamble, Walmart, International Paper. We could be here all day with that list of companies that Kristin has worked with. Her information has benefited 250 plus clients across 26 industries in 30 states. I think it's more than 30 states.
Oh, it's way over. I think I might hit 50 states by the end of the year. Like
That's
all
amazing.
50 states I'll have gone to.
Oh, that's so cool.
Including Alaska.
Yeah.
Boom.
Alaska.
Okay.
Woohoo. I want to go on that trip. And 100 plus conferences. Not only that, but Kristin was a lecturer at the University of Alabama in Huntsville for over a decade and has done a wealth of research on multiple areas of communication and the organization as well. So it's great to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited. This will be great. I think this is awesome what you're getting, and this will be so helpful to you students. If you will use a tiny portion of what we give you, you will be so far ahead of so many of your peers.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about going through these discussions is just being able to give students that knowledge that they can take forward with them and use it in their job search, their future jobs, the next job, after that first job.
And every little advantage is important. When you are a millennial and Gen Z, at this point, there's a whole lot of you, and a lot of whom are college educated. So you're in a higher level of competition than what you think you are. So any communication skill in particular that you can gain that gives you an edge is something that you should take advantage of.
Yeah. So with that in mind, talk a little bit about the importance of networking. I think that a lot of students find networking to be kind of scary.
Terrifying.
And it is amazing how many times I think that you'll have students who suddenly identify themselves as introverts as soon as you bring up the topic of networking, because it is kind of scary.
Yeah.
You're going into a room of people that most of them you probably don't know, and you have to talk to them.
You do have to talk to them, or else it's a complete and total waste of time.
Right? It's like, why have you come? So talk a little bit about the importance of networking and why that can make a difference in them getting that first job and even getting, other opportunities beyond that.
So I think people blow networking completely out of proportion. What networking really is finding people that you can help and who can potentially help you. The goal really is to find grown-up friends, which you will find as you get older gets harder and harder and harder.
So much
and so networking is actually an opportunity in the same way that you might go to a frat party, right? Early on in your college career, you might go to an SGA event in order to meet people. It's the same sort of idea in a professional environment. You go to networking-based events, or you just go to events that you could network at. And a lot of people don't think about that. We'll hopefully talk about that some as we go through this today. But really what it is an opportunity for you to meet people who you make professional friends with, who will potentially mention your name. That to me is the goal of networking, is that when you're not in the room and someone brings up a topic that you're really good at or an area that you work in, that someone says, oh, I know who you need. You need Kristin Scroggin. You need Nicole McDavid. Yeah. That's the goal of networking, not to necessarily make more sales or get more connections, but to build relationships or even a loose acquaintances so that people like you enough to want to say your name in front of other people. So when you reframe that in your brain and look at it as an opportunity to potentially build connections that get you to the next step and the next step and the next step or the next client or on your way to being a full entrepreneur. To me, you cannot be an entrepreneur if you don't network. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And so many Gen Zs we see really want to own their business at some point in time in their careers. So to me, a lot of networking is making friends, making connections, telling people, oh, I know this. Who are you having a hard time getting in front of? Oh, I know somebody there. It's just building connections in a more adultish way with less alcohol. Well, sometimes there's a lot of alcohol, actually.
Be cautious of that.
There's lots of networking opportunities where there's a lot of alcohol.
Networking like off the rails. I bet that there's so many stories that like, the networking was going really well, but then
and then that third glass of wine hit, and it was downhill.
Choices were made.
Yeah, and you could better be clear on that too, right?
Yeah,
you can ruin your opportunities as fast as you can make them.
Yeah, and with that in mind, how do you make it effective? So you have this idea, the goal in mind is to have that person leaving the event with your name in their mind and that connection. So how do you make that an effective experience without like going up to somebody and being like, I really like dogs, right? Like how do you make it more than that?
So I think we have to make it really clear, because you and I are actually both like this, and most people don't believe that this is true. We are what you call extroverted introverts.
Yeah.
Which means we're very good at faking like we're extroverted, but in reality, we're perfectly fine being by ourselves.
So true.
And the energy is extremely draining, right?
Yes, 100%.
So to have to work yourself up, to intentionally go to a networking event, to go be around other human beings, is a lot of energy. And that's one of the things you have to understand. Like, you should not go to a networking event already worn out from the day. It's going to be an energy drain for you. And so I think a lot of the key is understanding that it's okay for you to put on a slight persona when you do this. Have sort of what I call the on version. There's an on version of Kristin, and then there's like a normal version. Like, most people could never handle this version of me all day, every day. It would be exhausting. My family, I would be divorced, right? Like, under no circumstances could people handle that much being on. Yeah. But when I am in a networking situation, or when I'm on a stage, or when I'm doing a presentation or a training, you have to add extra energy so that people have something to feed off of themselves. And people will naturally be drawn to people who have a positive attitude, who have positive body language, who are doing smiling. So even if you're just standing in the corner smiling when people make eye contact, you increase the chances that they'll come and talk to you. Yeah. But I'll tell you the number one thing that I've learned to do is I have found people who are out there who are real life extroverts. Like, there are people who in real life love networking. They love every single thing about it, jazzes them up. And so I go and make really good friends with the extrovert. It's very similar to, I'm not a math person. And so when I was in college, I would go and find the smartest math nerd I could find. I would become really good friends with them. And I'd say, I'll proof your papers if you help me with math. Yeah. And that's a little bit of the same sort of trade you're making with networking here, right? Yeah. So I would go and find the extrovert who I knew already in the room, and then I would just kind of accompany them as they worked the room. And that helped me come up with questions to ask along the way, and I was able to observe them and find a way that was sort of natural for them to move from point to point or question to question, and that helped me. I just began to model what that natural extrovert began to do. And then the great part is that as you make more of these friends along the way, now when you go to a networking event, it becomes easier for you to find your point person.
Right.
So it's really the most uncomfortable on the first few times. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and then you begin to genuinely look forward to it because you're going to hang out with your friends. Right. And so, to me, I would say your number one key here, right, in looking at at why it's so important, is finding those people, even if you are not a natural extrovert, finding those people and modeling their behaviors, even if it doesn't necessarily feel natural to you in that particular moment. What I say too is networking is a lot like eating your vegetables. Like, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
Right? In order to be successful, in order to have a healthy body, you're going to have to put some fiber in it. Right. Period. The end. Yes. Same thing here. In order to have a healthy career, you're going to have to put some networking in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of getting over yourself, right?
Yeah.
Modeling behaviors that you see other people do. Find somebody who does it well, attach yourself to them, and then as you get more comfortable, it begins to get easier and easier.
That's great. What would you recommend? Because I know sometimes one of the questions that students will have is if they're going to a networking event, they decide to go with, like, bring a friend with them. You're rolling your eyes.
Oh my Lanta.
So what is your thought of that? Because I know that I'm someone that when I go to an event, like, I like to kind of have a wing person there. But when you go to an event, I also know that there's that issue of where you go with your friends and then you end up getting, the food that's provided and you sit in the corner and you talk to your friends. and you leave,
and that's not networking.
No. And you're like, what's the purpose of it?
There's no point of that.
Yeah. So how did you help students kind of overcome that?
I get the idea, right, of having that wingman. And it's easier at the very beginning, right, to have that. Because, again, you need somebody, especially if you have somebody who is a natural extrovert, social butterfly that comes along with you, that doesn't mind kind of dipping in and out of conversations. It's kind of like if you've ever seen the show How I Met Your Mother, how Barney will be like, and have you met Ted, right? Like you kind of need a Barney sometimes to be like, have you met this person? And then disappear in order to kind of allow you to have that conversation.
Right.
So if you've got somebody that you can take along with you, that's good for that. But I will tell you that I've even had projects in my classes in the past where they have been assigned to do a networking opportunity and they all went together and they all hung out together.
Right.
And it was a complete and utter waste of time for them. They got the minimum amount of cards that they were supposed to get in order to check the boxes, but they made no true connections of people who could speak their name or recommend them for internships later or recognize them in the future. So I would say groups, bad. Wingman, not such a bad idea, right? But you have to be intentional about who you pick to bring along with you. That person needs to counteract. So if you're already I'd rather do this than die, you don't bring another friend who's like, I'd rather do this than die.
Right, because you're gonna
go and huddle.
Each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're gonna go huddle, and then you'll get all in your little corner and be like, oh, I don't like that person. What do you think about that person? So you have to be careful. If you're going to bring a wingman, you need to bring somebody that counteracts or balances you.
Yeah.
So even for me, for example, my husband is a for real introvert. Hates going to any of these events with me, but sometimes I will bring him along with me, and I call him my safety patrol. So it's like if I'm getting too far out there, right? If I'm getting a little too much energy because I'm naturally nervous doing this, he'll kick me back and be like, hey, maybe take it down a notch. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. A barometer of energy.
You're a little much at the moment. Maybe pull it back a notch or two. And I don't get mad at him because that's the only reason I bring him is to help me with the social energy side of that. Yeah. So if you are that big personality, it's not a bad idea for you to also pull somebody that's sort of the safety patrol that keeps you from drinking too much or getting a little beyond can change the topic quickly if you're stepping into something political, things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Kind of jumping off of that idea and thinking about different networking events. This is a question that I've always had. And I think that students in different situations, especially those that get further along in their career and they're going to things like conferences and stuff, I have been to some bigger events. So I've been to the State of the Schools event. I've been to the Small Business Awards event. And in going to those events, I was invited to come because there were seats available and as a way of networking. And I went to those events and I thought, I have no idea how to network at this event. Is this even for networking? And so what would be advice that you would give to kind of help navigate that? Because that is such a different situation. And it really has been eye-opening to me that this was even like something that would be thought of as networking.
Right.
Because essentially what happened is I went and ended up sitting down at the table. I had some really good chicken from the BBC. It was good. Cake was delicious. But then I left and thought, I didn't meet anybody.
Right.
So how do you navigate that to make it a better experience?
So I think the biggest problem that I see is students have a tendency to look for only events that have the word networking in the title.
Right.
They forget that there's a whole lot of ways for you to meet people.
Right.
Lots of ways. So for example, let's say that there is a charity in town that you're really passionate about. And they're having a fundraiser, right? Maybe they're going to pick up trash on the side of the street, or they're going to be, tagging pets, or whatever it is that you're really into. When you go to the big event, not just the like formal fundraiser, but the event, the doing something event, that's networking. As long as you are talking to people while you are there, you have officially networked. Because the goal is to find people who long term can help you out in your career, and you never know where you're going to meet those people. Right. So volunteer opportunities are a huge one. If you don't know where to get started, go find a passion project and go start with that. even something like a hiking club, or a pickleball tournament.
Oh, pickleball's so popular right
Pickleball's
now.
a huge thing right now.
So
and
big.
I mean, it is a great way for you to meet people all the way around. So that's a big one. Another one would be when you do have formal fundraisers. So for example, like the Margarita Ball is a big thing in Huntsville.
Yep.
You're going to kind of schmooze, right? The Heart Association. There's all these kind of open networks, right, where you can go. But here's the thing. When you go to that table, when you sit down, if you don't kind of introduce yourself to everybody and start those conversations, you're probably not going to get much out of it. So what I've learned to do is, if there's nobody interesting at my table, I just wander the rest of the time. I just float from table to table and find people that I do know, and then I have them introduce me to whoever it is that they're sitting with.
Okay.
Because very often what will happen is people will buy tables for their company, right?
Yep.
So let's say you really want to work at Leidos, right? Let's just use that as an example.
Okay.
And so if you know that Leidos is one of the sponsors of this particular fundraiser, then they are going to have a table at that event.
Yep.
And we'll have at least 8 booties in those chairs.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So you becoming intentional about going over there and saying, hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a communications major. I'm an art major. I'm a technical writer, whatever it is.
Right.
I would love to work at Leidos in the future. Do you have any tips for me on how I could potentially get an internship or things that you wish you would have known? People love to talk about themselves. And this is the biggest problem that people have in networking, is you go in thinking that you have to go and sell yourself. No, your goal is to find out as much about those people that's potentially usable to you in the future, right?
Yeah.
So asking them things like, tell me a little bit about what you do. Are there any clients that you're having a hard time getting in front of that I might know?
Yeah.
Is there any introductions that you need at this point in time where I might know somebody? Is there anything that you need subject matter expertise on?
Yeah.
Right? How can I connect you? Because when you focus on them, it's going to take the pressure off of you to sustain the conversation. And that's particularly important for those introverts that are out there.
Yeah.
And it might feel a little bit awkward, but somebody has to break the ice. And if you seriously want to use this degree that you're paying a whole lot of money for, you're going to have to get your foot in the door. There's just too many millennials and Gen Zs that are out there.
Right.
There's so many. You have to give yourself every possible advantage. Just having the piece of paper is not enough anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And so starting this significantly earlier than what you're doing. You're waiting until the last semester of your senior year to do any kind of networking. Right? If you will start being that nice little awkward sophomore, then it will get easier by your junior year, and it will be a whole lot easier by your senior. So just going to those different events, those fundraisers, is going to be another big thing. So volunteers, fundraisers. The other big thing I would tell you is an easy one is ribbon cuttings that are happening around town. So every time a new business opens, there's a ribbon cutting. They want people to come,
right? Because they want it to look good on media.
They want it to look good on media. Yep. And so you show up. It doesn't matter whether it's a business you're even going to use later on. You go. You're going to stand around while they do the thing. It gives you an opportunity to say, "Hey, how are you?" You have a little cake. You have a little punch.
Yeah.
You go up to the person that's the business owner later on. Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. Congratulate you on this amazing business opportunity. If you ever need anything connected to XYZ in the future, I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? $0.
Yeah.
Not formal. Right? You can drop in any day that you want to. You just literally look on the Chamber of Commerce, and every Chamber of Commerce in the country has this, right? So this is not something just unique to Huntsville.
Oh, yeah.
You look on the Chamber event, you see who's having a ribbon cutting, you drop in, you get some free cake, you say, hey, how you doing? Right? That's another really easy one. And then the last one I would say is looking for leadership groups around town. So like in Huntsville, for example, the Huntsville leadership group is really, really well formed. And there are multiple levels. There's even a level that they have called Elevate that is specifically designed for college students to do.
Oh,
and it introduces you to the city of Huntsville. All kinds of people who are in there. You're going to see all the movers and shakers that are your own age, and then they're going to be able to help with the ripple effect along the way. So if it's worth putting the money, right? For me, if you're going to spend this much money on a college degree, it's worth another $200 over the summer to potentially get major connections that are going to set you up for the rest of your career.
That's amazing. And I think that's great to take advantage of some of those extra opportunities and look at it as an investment in what you're doing going forward. So one of the things I want to ask you about, you're talking a lot about like they're going to events, they're talking to people. Would you say it would be a benefit for college students to have like some sort of business card or something to give out? Because I know that there's so many platforms now that you can use. I mean, you can use Canva. You can use, if you have the like student Adobe suite, there's various ways that you can create a business card. And I think from a lot of what you're saying is like, if I'm meeting somebody, I want to give them something that they can take with them.
Absolutely. You want to give them, but it's actually more important that you get. It's more important that you get their business card than you give them. So one of the tragic mistakes people make at networking is they come in, they bring a big stack of cards, they walk around, they get no information, and they're just handing these things out like it's candy, right? And they're like, woohoo, I've networked. Now these random people are going to call me. No, if you don't have any conversation with anybody, you don't pass cards, right? Yeah. So in reality, you're trying to you need their card more because then you've got the contact, you can control being able to reach out to them in the future. But having your own card, because if someone asks you, do I have a card, you want to be able to say yes. So Canva, absolutely. Vistaprint is super cheap. You can go online and go and look for Vistaprint coupons and get like 1,000 for like $5. Like, it's so cheap. They've got formats already there. Make sure that your whatever email address you use is not something that's going to be stupid, right?
My cat is amazing.
Like I'm so skeezy.com. Like none of that kind of nonsense.
At
and
AOL.
A professional. Exactly. Get that straight.
Yeah.
But make sure that you do have something that you can trade. But in reality, when it comes to business cards, the goal is to get more than it is to give.
So how do you have that great conversation and you get to the end of it and then you want to get that business card? And I think that for a lot of students is really difficult because then it's coming in with that ask, right? So how do they make that ask? Is there something that they can do that can maybe better transition into that and also help them to transition out of the conversation so you're not stuck in like an hour-long conversation with one person?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is use a pivot with like a coffee. I'd love to buy you coffee later and us continue to have conversation. I'd love to learn more. Can I buy you lunch one day? Can you give me your contact information so I can learn more and we can find out more? That usually is the idea of the promise of a future interaction is a good way to get out of a conversation that's gone on way too long. And it's also a good way for you to do an ask. So it's just a situation of, I got to continue to meet people because my teacher's going to be mad if I don't. You can always use those. You know how your mom tells you, like, you can always use me as a out to get out. You can always use your teacher in your college as they said I had to do this interview for this class. Go get them. Yeah. Right? Leverage me however you need to.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that there's this idea of saying, I need to go meet some other people. I would love to continue this conversation with you. Do you mind giving me your contact information? Do you have a card or anything like that? The idea of a promise of a future conversation. And then this is, again, why it's important for you to ask them along the way what they need, right? Yeah. Because now if they've said, well, I'm really having a hard time finding an electrician. And even if being an electrician is not in any way connected to your job, and you've got a friend's uncle who is an electrician, you being able to say, hey, give me your business card, and I will send you the information on that electrician, right? Gives you a reason for them to tag that information over to you. Yeah. So if you don't get that information on the front end of what they're needing and how you can help them and who they need intros to and that sort of stuff, the ask becomes a little bit harder. But also the promise of a future engagement is another way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And thinking of ways that you can connect in. I read a lot of books, And so I always think in books. And so if somebody will start, a conversation about something, I can almost immediately think of a book that I've recently read that connects. And so that's one of the things that I'll do because to me, that's such a great way to say, hey, I read a book about this and that would be such a great insight into what you were talking about. If you have contact information, I'd love to send you the title. And I'll say, because I can't always think of the title off the top of my head. I blame a Kindle for this. If I have the book cover, I can completely remember it. But if I have had it on my Kindle, I'm like,
it's gone.
It looks like the front of my Kindle.
Yeah.
And it has knowledge, right? So I think that's a great way. It's like just figuring out how you can connect in a way that then leads to that follow-up.
Yeah, books is a great one to pull off of. Or even if it's like a TED Talk that you've seen,
Ooh,
or a YouTube video that you've seen, that's a great way to be able to do it. Even if it's funny, right? So let's say you're talking about something like a lot of my stuff revolves around generations, and I can, in our conversation I can say, oh, have you seen Brad Prince's stuff? And they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, you have got to see his Instagram. It's fantastic. Give me your card. I'll send you the information. That's another way for you to do it.
Yeah.
Use social media, pop culture as conversation.
Oh, yeah. And you and I have traded podcasts before.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things that students send me is students that are past students will send me an email and say, hey, Miss McDavid, I was watching this, or I saw this on the news, and I thought immediately of our class. That's one of the things that makes me probably the most happy in the world in teaching. Like, I just love that. And so it's just like that little bit of follow-up. And it's not with any kind of ask, but it makes me remember those students. And I will tell you right now, those students are my students. Whenever they ask for a recommendation, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, I remember this, and I remember the connection, I remember the student. And so it really just helps to keep you in the forefront of their mind.
And you've demonstrated learning, right? You took something away from this also. So absolutely.
So how do you do that kind of, what should be your next steps of follow-up? So you make that connection, you get the business card, then what is, I think a question that students have is like, what's the appropriate amount of time before you follow up? How often should you follow up? What should you do going forward?
Okay, so I cannot emphasize this enough. You must build a LinkedIn page. I get that it's not cool in college world, but if you would like to ever get a job in the 21st century, it is your number one way to be able to get connections, right? State governments that I've worked with, pharmaceutical companies, they all utilize Recruiter Plus on LinkedIn. All of them, right? And so that to me is this first step. Once you build a really good LinkedIn page, you go online, you look and see all of the tricks on how to optimize your LinkedIn page. You have a good background, you have your header written in the way you're supposed to. You have a picture where you don't look like you're potentially drunk, right? Or half of your mom's head cut off out of the side of it, right? You need to spend the time and energy to make it look really good and professional here. And then that's your easy transfer, is that now you've got all your business cards. You go back to wherever you are, you pull out the business cards, you immediately link up those people with LinkedIn. In the message say, hey, I met you at this so-and-so networking event. I just didn't want to lose you in the future, so I would love to connect with you. You're going to find that LinkedIn is a lot looser than I think a lot of other social medias are, right? Like, I feel like even though, like, when people say, like, can I get your Snap? That to me feels almost a little personal in some ways. LinkedIn does not feel that way. Like, LinkedIn, you can go shoot the moon. If they accept you, awesome, right? Anybody you want to work for, you've thought about or anything, connect. And one of the things that I see a lot of college students don't do is they don't utilize the connections that their college professors have. Right?
Yeah.
So link up with your college professor who likes you, preferably one that likes you, right? And then, then go down their contact list and see who they know, right? And say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm in Miss McDavid's class. I'm going to be looking for an internship next summer. Would love to talk to you more about what it would be like to work at Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's such a great example, and I can definitely attest to this, especially with Kristin's LinkedIn. I had a question about one of the areas that we were looking at for the career prep course, and I either texted or emailed Kristin, I can't remember because we talk on both, and was like, hey, do you have any idea of anybody? And Kristin said, let me put it on LinkedIn. And I don't know how many responses we got. There were over 50 plus.
A lot.
And what was amazing was somebody that I talked to just the other week about it. I had a conference call with them, and I thought it was somebody who was in Huntsville. No, they're in Boston. And they're actually like pretty prominent in their field. And I said, oh, do you know Kristin? And they said, no, a CEO that I worked with connected me through this post that Kristin put on there. And I mean, they were a wealth of knowledge. We've talked a lot about different ways to connect. and assist students.
That's great.
And it was amazing. And I was like, this is the thread.
Yeah,
this is the thread.
You'll be surprised at how many business professionals are willing to give you information at $0.
Yes.
Especially through LinkedIn. Like, I find that people are actually more willing to mentor you digitally than they are in your actual company.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I think it provides them with a little bit more flexibility.
Yep.
And you all, as college students, I cannot emphasize this enough. You are at a advantage because so many professionals in the industry, they charge high prices for the things that they do. But when you talk about college students and helping college students, they're like, how can we step in? What can we do? And so they are really, really looking at how they can help you all in your college experience.
Right.
And so you've got to take advantage of that because that is such a short amount of time in your overall career where you have those connections.
I agree.
And so it's so important to use them.
100%. So my first step is, if you can get business cards, if you get anything networking in person, your first step is always the LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You connect on the LinkedIn. And then if they don't have one for some weird, because sometimes they don't, or you've just gotten a whole bunch of sometimes you'll go to events, networking events, and they're what I call dud events, right? Where you've got a lot of bankers and a lot of realtors, and and a lot of people that sell makeup or whatever it is like that. Like that's not good. If you get in there and you realize that, you'd be like, deuces, I'm out. Like, it's not worth your time anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Don't waste your time trying to make an event work for you. But when you become intentional about seeking out places, you really want to be looking for where the movers and shakers already are, right? Yeah. So you want to look at stuff like that's happening at your local chambers. You want to look at things like conferences that are happening within your field. Volunteer. That's an easy way for you to go. Yeah. Volunteer to go help at a conference. You'll get free access to some of the most brilliant people, and you're going to be giving all these people your ID. So as you're giving it to them, you're like, oh, you work for Leidos? I'd love to work for Leidos. Can I give you my card too? Like, it gives you a way to get in front of people that you normally can never, ever touch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's what I worked registration for the Southern States Communication Association throughout graduate school. And it was not only like an amazing experience of just being able to go to the conference and just, have those different sessions that we went to, but also just like the number of people that you're meeting, and you were meeting in communication some of the top people in the field, and they're like asking for your help, right? Because you're running registration. They're like, I don't know how to get to this room, and you're taking them to that room and you're talking to them, and those are the things that create those kind of pockets of time and information. And that experience and in doing that, that's one of the things that has given great connections for me in different
and I would
times
also
that
say
I've needed it.
Don't just look for those conferences that are within your major. You're looking for industry. Yeah. So let's say you want to work in the aviation industry, right? Or you want to work in mechanical engineering or in architecture or in defense. You go to the events where the defense people would be, not just where the technical writers are.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's thinking, and this is one of the things that I find a lot of college students have a hard time doing. They get really narrowed in on just what they do, and they know one or two jobs, but they're not looking at how do I match up something that I'm already passionate about, like my son is obsessed with planes and trains for some strange reason. How do you match up that, right? There's things that I already love, I just nerd out about, and take the skill that I have and apply it within a field that I love. That's how you find a job where you never work a day in your life. Right? Is you find a passion area.
100%.
Right? So you can do that with coding. You can do, there's so many different areas. Some of the best coding jobs that I know right now are in agriculture. Oh, right? Yeah. Because somebody's got to program all those machines to cut all of the, right? Genius. To cut down all of the, like find the thing that you care about that you want to make better, and then figure out how you can use your skill. But when you're going to a networking event, because you go to that conference is networking, you go based on industry, not necessarily based on major.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the things that you touched on a little bit that I'd love to circle back to, because I think that you and I both being from the communication field and having that background, I look at this at a very different perspective, but sometimes if you haven't done that kind of theory work and knowledge, it can be really difficult. So if you go to a networking event and you do get rejected, how do you learn not to internalize that? Because I think that sometimes that's really difficult. I mean, I remember specifically going to a networking event, and it was what you said, it was kind of a dud.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be a great experience at the end because I met someone that I connected with really well. But at the beginning of it, I almost left.
Yeah.
Somebody just kind of tossed the card at me, and then they turned away and kept talking to someone. And I was being my super extroverted self. I was like, but wait, I was so nice.
You're supposed to like me.
Yeah. I was like, I came up and I was very chipper. Like,
Yeah.
you know. So how do you kind of deal with that rejection? Because there is that moment, and I had that moment that I was like,
Yeah.
I would rather go home.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So, what I have found is that in my life so far, in my 45 years of being on the planet, there are some connections that need to be made, and there's some connections that do not need to be made.
Yeah.
And that sometimes making the wrong connection can put you down a rabbit hole that will have you chasing a path that you don't need.
Right.
So for me, in many ways, when I have somebody that maybe does something that's a little more like, I'm not into what you're doing, or I think whatever you study is gunk, or whatever it is, my brain says, warning signal, right? Not it's their problem, it's not mine. They're somebody that's potentially toxic to me being able to achieve my life path.
Yeah.
Right? So if you've got somebody that's throwing you business cards and then turning their back on you, you don't want that joker anyway.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so instead you have to look at it and go, okay, next time I go, I will look to stay away from that person. Right?
Yeah.
And this is the other thing you have to understand. In networking, word gets around, right?
Yeah.
So when
Probably not a good idea to toss a business card.
Yeah, absolutely not. Or turn your back on anybody too.
Yeah.
Just the idea, like, if you are snobby or dismissive, or even, I think what I've seen is a lot of people will convince themselves that they're ultra shy, and that gives them the excuse somehow that they don't have to function in the world because they're ultra shy.
Yeah.
Your internal stuff that's going on does not negate your need to be able to network.
Right.
You're going to have to learn strategies in order to, if you want to get ahead, you're going to have to do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
So don't let yourself give yourself an excuse, right? And that's the problem, is when somebody does that, it has a tendency to feed that self-fulfilling prophecy, where you begin saying, see, I knew this was a waste of time, and I'm never going to make it in this career field, and I'm not going to any of these things anymore. And then guess what happens? You don't make it in that career field because you don't go to any more of those things.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
So what I have learned is I reframe it as it's their problem, not necessarily me.
Right.
And the other thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is you have no idea what's going on in people's lives.
So true.
You have no clue. Like, you have no idea if they just left the hospital from where their mother was very sick. You have no idea if someone just got deployed and they're like, you don't know what's going on in the background of people's stories.
So true.
And so to me, it is easier to use attribution theory, right?
Yep.
Attribution theory is where in your brain, when somebody does something weird, you try to explain it away.
Yep.
What I do is just explain it in a positive way, where I say somebody does something weird and I go, there must be something really bad going on in their life. Because if they're this grumpy to a stranger, something's up.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing with people, like when I run into people who want to just ask a super hard question, right? Or want to embarrass you. My first jump now is, who made you this way? Like, who messed you up so much that as a grown adult, your number one goal in life is to hurt another person because they're a threat to you? Like, sorry, your life is garbage, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is a choice. You have to choose to reframe. And so I would say be careful. Don't take that necessarily as rejection. In some ways, you need to look at that as, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness I don't have to deal with that goober. That's one more person. And y'all, there's 7.5 billion people in the world. I promise you can find your people. You do not have to put up with mean, jerky people. You don't. There's lots of opportunities that are out there, but you got to keep going. If you tell yourself it's you and it's personal and you're never going to make it, you will self-fulfill prophecy, and then don't be shocked when you are behind everyone else in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true, is that idea of reframing that narrative. My mom used to always say that people were doing their best. And it was in such a kind of bright, energetic way. Like somebody would cut her off in traffic, and my mom would be like, well, they just must be doing their best.
I still, if somebody shoots me a bird, I blow them a kiss every single time.
It's like,
I'm
it's
like,
gonna be okay.
Who hurt you? I'm so sorry. Your life is this horrible, but this is the most intense thing happening for you today.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that reframing that and really like getting out of that idea of that kind of way that we can very much centralize stuff, that we're creating the action when so much of the time we're not. And you can only be in control of you.
That's right.
100%.
Yep.
You only can control you. That for some people is a life lesson, but it is so important because it is. It takes a long time to learn.
And the bottom line is that most people are not out to get you. It's that they're out for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? They're out to make sure that they get ahead. And so many people just use negative strategies in order to continue to do that. And you just happen to be, collateral damage in that situation. So you can choose how you decide to frame that event. It's completely up to you and it's within your power. And these people don't matter to you. Most of these people you're never going to see again. Right?
Yeah.
So don't give them more power in your life than what they necessarily do. Your goal is to find maybe 2 or 3 people who you can really help, you can really connect with. And that's a success, massive success.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming today. This has been great, and we've learned so much. Is there any last advice that you'd want to give to students before we close?
I mean, the big thing I would tell you is there is this thing called digital networking. I know that that's a lot more comfortable for you as a Gen Z because you do anything that makes you uncomfortable. You have a tendency to use your phone as a filter on that. If you want to get ahead, you can't do the same thing as everyone else. Okay, so whether you are an art major, whether you're a writing major, history major, whatever it is, right? You cannot do the same thing that everyone else is doing and still stand out. And this is a way you intentionally put yourself out there. It is a way to make yourself stand out, and people will remember because it is so very rare for young people right now to put themselves out there. So when you do that, it is going to give you a huge, huge advantage. So don't be afraid to do something new, even if none of your friends are doing it, even if everybody else thinks it's a dumb thing. It's not. You're not going to remember them in 6 years anyway, y'all. They're going to be that dude with the hair, right? Or the drunk kid from college. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like the kid that smelled. Like, you're not going to remember. Don't give those people power over your long-term life career. Just because other people aren't doing it and they don't get it doesn't mean that you don't need to give yourself every single advantage, especially right now in college when you can use college projects and professors and 100%. Things to give you a springboard. Whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm never gonna care. You can use me today. I don't even teach at UAH anymore, and you can still be like, I'm doing this project from Miss Scroggin's class, right? Sure. Use those things to help give you an advantage along the way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Kristin, for being here today to talk about networking and the follow-up. I feel like we hit on such great points of information that's going to be so helpful for our students and anyone who is about to enter the workforce for the first time. We would also like to thank Blue Summit Supplies for this wonderful facility that we are in and the resources to make this recording possible. A special thank you to our assistant media writer and researcher, Macy Morgan, video producer and editor, Jesse Hendricks, and producer, Grace Trutel. I'm Nicole McDavid, and we'll see you next time for more CAHS Career Prep.